Dude, you guys, thanks for being on my podcast.
Yeah.
So this podcast is called the In Between Podcast because we just do it in between sermons. And we often talk about things that, we talked about in the sermon, hard things or fun things, whatever, I learned this from you, Trav, though, that there's there's so much goodness that gets cut off the sermon block, right?
Yeah, or you'd like to think so. Yeah. I think important things have been edited out. Things that people need to hear. The viewers at home need to hear this.
Totally. So that's the kind of like how the podcast started. But I wanted to bring you guys on specifically just to talk about church planting. So being a church plant, that's, ourselves 2.25 years old. Just thought it'd be fun to talk about, what this is all about. So why don't you guys just give us a little bit, give our listeners, our viewers here, a little bit of an introduction to yourselves. Why don't you start, Jerrod?
Sure. We moved to Tulare to plant Radiant Tulare 6 years ago. And so we moved there with a core team, and we were serving the community, gathering together, praying, equipping the team for about 2 years. And then we launched a service 2019. And that was like
good timing, right?
Perfect timing to launch.
October of 2019?
October 2019. And then Rachel, my wife, was pregnant with our second daughter, and she was born January in 2020. And then a couple months later,
the world fell apart.
Down and fell apart. So
you lead Radiant Church Tulare. You guys are about, what is that? Help me with your math.
So we're 4 years old now.
Yeah.
Yep. Last year we installed, we've got an elder team of 4 men, and then we also laid hands on 8 deaconesses. And so we've got a very strong team of leaders in the church.
Cool.
And healthy little family.
Yeah.
Did you ever think you'd plant a church?
Never.
Did you ever think that you'd pastor a church?
Never.
So then
Never.
Why do you do those things?
Yeah.
Why would you choose to do that with your life?
I didn't know it was legal to plant a church. I didn't even know it was like a thing that you could do.
I've been asked that before. You can do that?
Who said that you could do that? Yeah. I loved the church. And my dad was a pastor in Tulare, and was happy, loved serving the church, loved being a part of the church. I think front row seat, witnessing what that life looked like, devoted to full-time ministry, was just not, in my mind, the cup of tea that I wanted. And I thought in my mind, I was like, I think that I could still serve the church, love Jesus in a different way, but still be fully engaged and active, which I still think is true, but my story shifted with a quick little snap.
What is your story of call? Like, I don't know if I remember that story.
I was working in radio, and then left there. I felt more called, you're speaking to like thousands of people, but seeing nobody on the radio. And it's like, man, I'd rather just have like one-on-one than one on like 10,000 people. I just don't like this. So that felt clear. I stepped out of that, and then was working for Elevate, which was like a young adult ministry with my buddy Joel Headland at 210. And that was great, except I couldn't pay any bills. And so I got a job working in a warehouse, and then that moved into graphic design. And I thought, like, all of my plans got disheveled. And so I was just kind of, I'm here, I'm happy. And so I thought, this will be the path, and this will be the path. And so I thought that was true with graphic design. And then I got slid a job description across the table at Starbucks from Travis. And it's like, hey, what do you think about doing this?
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't think I want to do that. Thank you very much.
Was that the infamous secretary?
That was the
part
secretary.
Shepherd, part secretary at Radiant Church.
Yeah.
Did it actually say that on the job?
I don't know if we I don't know if it said it on there, but we
like
definitely
a video, man.
it developed into that. Yeah, there's some incriminating photos that would not do well right now.
This would be canceled. Canceled.
There was no major
Yeah.
moment. It felt like, I this is an opportunity to serve the church, and I feel like this, and I thought it was just going to be a season, just a moment, and I actually was excited about supporting church plants, because that was one of the
Even at that time.
Yeah, even at that time, I was caught off guard showing up to Radiant and then hearing, "Oh yeah, we're a church plant that's going to plant churches," and it's like, well, this sounds awesome. I don't.
Well, maybe that's a good time to cut off and ask this guy about his story and like what I mean, because in a sense, like I think I'm hearing you say, he kind of cast vision for planting, and you're a product of that. And I know that that's my story. Like I wouldn't have thought of church planting if it weren't for the vision that you cast. Now, of course, there's been other resources along the way, but why did you plant? And what's your, kind of the shorter version of the story?
Well, I think that I was watching kind of my friend group exit the church. Like I think I was watching a mass migration, not unlike what we're witnessing now. This would have been more the emergent movement, which was a movement of things were being deconstructed. Not just how we did church, but what we believed as the church was being picked apart. And so I was watching my group of friends leave the church. And I think I just had an intense burden for people. And that should be said from the beginning, that I just don't think church planting is about planting a church. I think it's about evangelism. It's about reaching people, and it's about having a burden for people before you even have a burden for a place or how you're going to arrange the furniture. I just had an incredible burden for my friends, and I knew we could like leave the church and complain about the church. That was easy. Lots of people do that, but I had a desire to do something about it, So I said basically to a group of friends, rather than leave and complain about the church, why don't we do something about it and plant a church that reaches these people that we have a heart for. At the time, I don't think I was aware. I also was unaware that it was like acceptable. I thought people planted churches in India,
exactly.
like not in Visalia. And I mean, if California had a Bible Belt, like we're in it. So I just thought, you don't plant churches in your hometown. You go to the field and you plant churches. And so I too had friends, family members asking me like, can you do that? So I know now all the statistics that you're more likely to get saved into a church that's less than 10 years old than you are an established church. I know why church planting revitalizes even existing churches in a town. I know all that stuff, but I didn't know that. I just knew. I knew that I was burdened for my friends. I knew I wanted to do something about it, and I did have a strong sense that God was calling me to it, that it wasn't just discontent. It was like a divine discontent. Like this is something that could happen, but this is something that like really should happen, and God's behind this. So that was probably the reason for planting in 2005. I just found it interesting that like as churches, we have a plan to reproduce everything but other churches. Like we're a church, and we're going to have disciples, but we're also going to make disciples, and we're going to have leaders, but we're going to make leaders. And basically, you want a healthy church reproduces disciples, reproduces leaders. And then it just was like, why wouldn't a healthy church also reproduce churches? Like, why wouldn't we? And so few churches have a plan to plant another church. And I think that that's really Well, I don't think it's healthy, actually. And I think it's kind of strange. And then I think because we don't have a plan to get pregnant, there's a lot of accidental pregnancies. There's a lot of like, well, they left because they want to do it slightly differently. And so, yeah, I also think like some of my burden to like plant churches came from, yeah, probably pain. Like when you ask people about the vision that they have for life to be a father, sometimes that's connected to I had a good father growing up, but a lot of times it's like my dad was not a good dude. And so I now have vision in my life because of the pain. And I think a lot of times our call in life is the result of some sort of lack we experience. So when I said I wanted to plant a church in 2005, that was seen as a real threat to the existing churches. And I just thought, man, I want to be a place that when someone comes and says, I want to plant a church, that's celebrated.
When we came to Radiant, we came in 2010, and we were like, they're a church plant. So that was novel. But then we showed up and you were talking about, at least the way I remember it, you were talking about a constellation of churches.
Yeah. That was the phrase.
Yeah. I don't know if you were using that phrase, but you were talking about planting other churches. And I guess I wonder, at that point, you kind of had vision for reproducing. And where did that start? Like, I mean, you talked a little bit about it, but where did you get the vision for a constellation of churches? Do you remember? Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't, again, I think that I don't want to put the cart before the horse. I think the burden and the vision that we have is for evangelism. Like I want to reach people. I want them to know and love Jesus and belong to a Bible believing, spirit filled church. I just think it's the best. And so like that evangelistic burden gave rise to the vision for church planting, because it's a means to an end. Like Paul didn't go to a city to plant a church. He went to preach the gospel. And then when people responded to the gospel, he just would put a roof over it. So again, the vision, I think, is to, in particular in our valley and now much bigger in our state, is to see people meet Jesus and belong to his family. And church planting is just an awesome tool. It's a means to that end. I mean, I hear reports from you guys about the baptisms and the people that you're able to reach because you were able to put something in Tulare, in Exeter. And it's just, it's thrilling.
Essentially, you're saying, evangelism and camaraderie are kind of like at the heart of the vision to see a constellation of churches, not like, I don't know.
We can do it better.
Yeah. Or even like, we're going to build this model. And it's going to be relational and I mean, I know that like a big part of your story, I would guess, or I surmise. Is that, what does that mean? It's kind of like a surprise that has some wisdom behind it.
Surmise.
I think that if I know your story well enough, it's that like the relational component was a huge part of why you wanted to plant and how you wanted to plant.
Yeah.
And I mean, what would you say about that?
Yeah, I think that was part of the vision that captured me. And then I thought I would just be kind of on the sidelines cheerleading on through this constellation of churches.
Okay, right.
The idea, especially, I think it was rooted in the valley, in the Central Valley. And this idea where we all kind of know each other and we're all kind of the butts of everybody's jokes. It's like there's this sibling rivalry throughout the valley. And the idea of a constellation of churches where you don't fight for your own kind of independence or like, I'm going to do it this way or that way, but you actually submit to one another, you prefer one another. that was super attractive. Like, oh, we could probably go faster, alone or do whatever, but to stay together, it feels like, oh yeah, that you might go slower, whatever that, proverb thing is, but like for sure there's a richness to there, but also it's just for me, it's like, what a platform for just the gospel to rest on top of, like to preach from. Like, we don't do this for Tulare. We don't do this for Exeter. We don't do this for Visalia. Like, we're doing that there, but we do this for the family of God. Like, this is the kingdom of God, and it's bigger than that. And so I love the dirt that I'm in, but it's only because there's people there. Like, I don't love that dirt. I love the people that inhabit it. And to be a part of something bigger instantly when you plant and you're like, yeah, we have family in the valley, it's like, oh, wow, what a gift to plant in that way, where you're not like slugging it out. I mean, you're still slugging it out, but you have like big brothers and, family that's around to say like, oh yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's so easy when you plant to get so like pigeonholed, like, and just focus on your thing. And I think it's so healthy to be a part of something bigger. I think also it has been historically true that when churches are founded, they end up with someone leading them who has founder syndrome, who can, in time, start to operate like a dictator, and dictatorships always flourish for a time. And then in the end, something goes south. So I think also, our people really feel encouraged knowing that there's accountability. That you can say to your church, like, hey, if you're ever struggling with a decision that we've made, you could go talk to Trav. And Trav is not, headquarters. Like, I don't not know Noel or know the church. Like, you're connected. And I think that that's encouraging even for Radiant Visalia. They know that there are people looking in. And you're accountable because, I mean, there's always been, leaders have always fallen. That's not a new thing. But lately there's been a lot of, and maybe power that's been abused. So I find that it's really helpful.
My favorite experience, what I hold dear, is that got to do this with people. So not like doing my thing, watch me and my moves over here, but getting to do this with people, whether that's, a core group of people who lived in Tulare, moved to Tulare, worked in Tulare, saying we love Jesus and we want to see him glorified here. So we're in this together for 2 years in a living room, or together with Trav and elders in Visalia, and on a Monday calling and saying, hey, what do I do with this? Coming to Exeter, like that, the joy of family, like the family of God, that's been the best part, is genuinely, almost like the losing your life and you'll find it. Like, I found so much more life in the common union of like togetherness than in me writing an album or doing this or it's like, that's cool, but there's just so much life in the together. That's probably by far the best part of it.
Our church is 18 years old, and acting like an 18-year-old, like kind of like becoming an adult, kind of thing. So, I mean, I think noticing, observing, seeing over these many years, the difference that it's made in people's lives, but also in our community, continues to be the thing that gets me excited. Getting to celebrate with you guys when there's baptisms and people are added to the family and it's always been, the best part of this has been like family and mission. And that continues to be it for me. Like I find that most people, they want to go, but they just don't want to leave. And I think when we carry a vision for being a sending church, people have that. They get to go, but they don't have to leave.
Yeah.
They know that they're a part of something bigger, you know? So yeah, that kind of family on mission, getting to be now a sending church. Yeah, it does get me excited.
Yeah.
Although it hurts. It's not fun to send your best and to try to figure out how to continue to lead when some of your leaders have gone to lead elsewhere. I find it satisfying to see the fruit that's coming from your guys' lives, even though I don't get to see you on Sundays.
Yeah.
I think there's two things like that. I mean, I think are really essential is to continually ponder like those who've gone before us. And the many days that they felt like hanging it up, the many days that they were tempted to throw in the towel and quit because it got difficult, and they endured, and we're so glad that they did, because we're standing on their shoulders. I think about that a lot, and I think and now it's our turn. It's our turn to be faithful, even when we're not seeing the outcomes we want to see, to just keep being faithful. And to pass the baton. So there's something motivating to me about remembering the big story that we're a part of, and that faithful men and women pushed through difficulty and now I'm better for it. Yeah. And I want to be that. Yeah. That's motivating. And the other thing that I think is really important is like staying in touch with, because leadership just is painful. Life is painful. Like, and I think you have to stay in touch with this being a privilege. And like, if you can keep that, like, wow, what a privilege. Like, and if it can continue to be a mix of those two things, pain and privilege, you're probably going to keep going. But when it just becomes pain and you've lost a sense of privilege, or like, this is, you're done. You're done. So, and I think I see that in people's lives where they're very in touch with the pain and very out of touch with the privilege. And they've probably got 12 months before they throw in the towel. So we just constantly, I tell myself, like, this is a huge privilege, what I get to do, what I know. This is all, I count this a real joy. And I'm not a joyful person. I'm more of a melancholy person. That's why I hang out with Jerrod. He's more of an optimist. I'm not. So I have to tell myself, like, this is a good deal. Like, that you get to do this is a good deal. Otherwise, if you're rehearsing something else, I don't think you make it very long. So you got to stay in touch with that stuff, even with, I think, any job, any task you've been given, parenting, leading, any place of work.
Yeah. Well, thanks, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, thanks for inspiring church planting.
Yeah.
Thanks for getting us amped up. I think it's funny in some ways because it takes, I guess, stories are a little different, but it takes a lot of gumption to go out and plant. In a lot of ways, it takes that kind of gumption that's pretty independent and pioneering.
Yeah.
But a little ways in, you're like,
yeah, totally.
I need help.
You're like, oh, crap.
So I know that we're excited. I'm excited to run together over these next years that are ahead of us, with both of you guys and the family that God, continues to build. So I think that we could talk forever about this, and we will. We have the rest of our lives to talk, but I think we could wrap it up right there. Yeah. Thanks so much. I just want to clarify, this is a coffee counter that we are sitting at here for the good people on the interweb. There's a coffee counter that we've been sitting at here.
I don't think that's true.
church planting. It'll make you bald and drive you to drinking.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Noel.